Welcome to Life Stories, where we share tales of resilience, growth, and transformation. Today's story is about Megan Williams, a dedicated professional who thought her career at Richardson Engineering had come to an end. After 10 years of hard work, she's faced with an unexpected dismissal, only to learn that life has other plans for her. From betrayal to triumph, this is a journey of patience, wisdom, and seizing opportunities. Join us as we follow Megan's path to an unexpected promotion and a new chapter in her life. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to start today's journey. My name is Megan Williams, and after 10 years of dedicated service at Richardson Engineering, this was how it was going to end. It was the worst kind of feeling, when you've spent years pouring your soul into something, only to have it all erased in a matter of minutes. I had helped this company grow through economic downturns, worked countless late nights perfecting designs, and always stayed true to my commitment to excellence. But none of that seemed to matter now. I stood in the doorway of Thomas Harris' office, my heart racing, my mind a flurry of thoughts. But my voice came out steady. I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. "You're not going to deny me this opportunity," I said, my voice rising slightly as I stood there, firm in the doorway. The words hung in the air, almost in disbelief. I could see the satisfied grin on his face, the smug expression he wore like armor, and I wanted nothing more than to wipe it off. He looked up from his desk, as if he had been waiting for this moment, a master playing his final card. After a decade of navigating company restructures, downsizing, and the shifting tides of the industry, I had thought I was irreplaceable. But, of course, it had all come down to this. A conversation that would decide my fate. An announcement that would render everything I had worked for meaningless. "Megan, please, sit down." Thomas motioned to the chair across from his desk, his voice dripping with a rehearsed sympathy that I had come to hate. "We're bringing in someone younger for your role. After 10 years, it's time for you to move on." It wasn't that he didn't understand the consequences of his words. It wasn't even that I was being replaced by someone with more qualifications or experience, because that wasn't the case. No, he wasn't replacing me with someone more capable, he was simply replacing me with someone younger. Olivia, she was named, a fresh graduate from Berkeley who had yet to face the harsh realities of the workplace. And she was about to take my place. I took a deep breath. The sting of indignation surged within me, but I fought it down. This wasn't the time for an emotional outburst. I had learned long ago that patience and composure often made the strongest statements. "I appreciate the notice, Thomas," I said, my response calm, even muted. As I kept my gaze steady, I could tell by the slight furrow in his brow that he had expected something different from me, perhaps tears, or anger, or something that might allow him to feel superior. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. For a brief moment, Thomas blinked, thrown off script. I could tell the balance was shifting. There was something unsettling about seeing someone so sure of themselves suddenly thrown into uncertainty. "Well, good," he said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "I'm glad you understand. The transition will take place over the next month, and we'll need you to train your replacement. Olivia, she graduates next week." The words stung more than I expected. Training her, my replacement, a girl barely out of school, who had no real experience in the field, was now going to take over the role that I had worked so hard for. I nodded. "Of course," I said, swallowing the bitterness in my throat. But there was a flicker of something deep within me, something that told me I wasn't done yet. Thomas had no idea what was about to unfold. I stood up to leave, smoothing down my blazer, trying to retain some semblance of dignity. "Will there be a formal announcement?" I asked, my voice steady as I took a step toward the door. "We'll announce it at the department meeting on Monday," Thomas replied, already turning his attention back to his computer, as if the conversation had already been concluded. He was dismissing me, and I could feel the weight of that finality. "And the quarterly board meeting? Is that still next Thursday at 2 p.m.? I asked, keeping my tone light. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of unease cross his face. "Yes," But that's not something you need to concern yourself with anymore. He replied curtly, as if I had overstepped some invisible boundary. I shrugged, just double-checking my calendar. I said lightly, offering him a thin smile that, I hoped, conveyed just enough ambiguity to leave him wondering. Well, I won't take up any more of your time, I added, walking out of his office, feeling strangely calm, as though a weight had been lifted. But it was more than that, it was a feeling of quiet determination. The sense that I was holding a secret that would soon turn everything on its head. I had known for 3 weeks now that things were not as they seemed. I had received an unexpected call from Sarah Mitchell, the CEO of Richardson Engineering. Sarah had been direct, her tone far more relaxed than I had ever heard it in the office. She had asked me to meet her at Bayview Cafe the following morning. A place far removed from the world of corporate power plays. When we met, she told me everything. The company was restructuring, and after watching my work on the Westlake project, Sarah had made the decision to offer me a seat on the executive board. I had been stunned. This was no mere promotion, this was a chance to lead. To shape the company's future from the top. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. You're going to be our new Chief Operations Officer, Sarah had said, her eyes filled with sincerity. The board is already on board. And we've been watching your work for some time now. You understand both the technical and human elements of our business better than anyone else here. It's time for you to step into the role that's been waiting for you. But the decision was to remain a secret, for now. I had agreed to sign the contract with Sarah and the company's legal counsel present. And for 3 weeks, I had been working behind the scenes, reviewing confidential reports, drafting new operational frameworks, and attending meetings disguised as vendor sessions. All while Thomas thought I was quietly stepping out of the company. It was almost poetic. In a way, the man who thought he could push me aside was about to see everything he'd worked for crumble in front of him. As I walked back to my desk, the reality of it all settled over me. Thomas thought he had won. He thought I was just another casualty of the corporate game. But what he didn't know was that my story was far from over. The next few days passed in a blur. The weight of the secret I was carrying felt oddly comforting, like a quiet anticipation that I could sense but not fully describe. At my desk, I went about my usual routine, responding to emails, reviewing project timelines, and making notes for my supposed replacement, Olivia. I did my best to stay focused, keeping my mind sharp and my emotions in check. I had learned over the years at Richardson Engineering that patience was often the most powerful tool in moments like these. As I worked, I noticed the occasional glance from colleagues, their eyes lingering on me with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. I knew what they were thinking. They had seen Thomas's smug grin when he'd announced my departure. They had heard the whispers about my exit, the insinuations that I was being quietly eased out of the company. They were all expecting me to crack under the pressure, to show some sign of distress or anger. But I refused to give them that satisfaction. It was almost as if they were waiting for me to fall apart. But I wasn't about to give them that. On Wednesday afternoon, I received a text from Sarah Mitchell, CEO of Richardson Engineering. The message was simple but clear. Conference room at 1:30 p.m. tomorrow. Come through the executive entrance. That was all it said. But I knew exactly what it meant. The board meeting was the next day. The one that would change everything. The one where I would step into my new role as COO and put an end to Thomas's little game. But I wasn't going to just walk in and announce myself. No, that would be too easy. Instead, I would let the events unfold, step by step, as I watched the man who had tried to push me out of the company squirm in front of everyone. The evening before the board meeting, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought me to this point. 10 years, a decade of late nights and hard work. I had seen friends come and go, watched projects succeed and fail, and endured every challenge thrown my way. In the end, though, it wasn't the technical skills I had mastered or the projects I had completed that had led me here. It was the lessons I had learned along the way. Patience, resilience, the ability to adapt to the ever-changing tides of the corporate world. And then, There was the lesson I had learned from life itself. The importance of knowing when to stay silent and when to speak. I had spent years holding my tongue, observing, learning, biding my time. Now, it was time for all of that to pay off. Thursday morning arrived, and I dressed carefully for the occasion. I chose a charcoal gray suit that was both professional and commanding, paired with a jade green blouse that brought out the color of my eyes. I wanted to look every bit the part of the executive I was about to become, but without being overly conspicuous. When I entered the office that morning, the atmosphere was noticeably different. There was an air of tension in the building. Colleagues whispered in hushed tones about the upcoming board meeting, their curiosity palpable, but I wasn't fazed by any of it. I had a role to play, and I was determined to play it well. As I made my way to the break room to grab a quick coffee, I ran into Javier, a colleague from another department. He had seen many people come and go over the years, and I could tell he was trying to gauge my mood. His eyes were kind, though concerned, but not in a pitying way. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice soft. "Never better," I replied with a faint smile, keeping my voice low to avoid attracting attention. "Just the usual Friday drama." Javier nodded, though his eyes lingered a little longer than normal. I had a feeling he knew something was up, but he didn't press. He was too smart for that. Instead, he offered me a quiet thumbs up as I turned to leave. I wasn't ready to share the full story with anyone just yet. Especially not with Javier. There was still too much to be done. Too much at stake. And besides, once everything was over, there would be plenty of time for explanations. At precisely 1:30 p.m., I walked into the executive entrance to the boardroom. The air was thick with anticipation, but I remained calm. I was about to take my place at the table, and I knew that every decision I made from here on out would have consequences, both for me and for everyone else at Richardson Engineering. I walked into the boardroom and stood tall, my posture confident but measured. As I looked around, I saw the familiar faces of the board members, all seated at the long mahogany table. The atmosphere in the room was one of formality and power, but I could sense a shift in the air. Today was different. William Harrison, the chairman of the board, stood as I entered and extended his hand to me. "Miss Williams," he said with a smile, "we're delighted to have you join us officially." His words felt like a quiet affirmation of everything I had worked for. But there was no time to savor the moment. I had work to do. The others greeted me warmly, but their expressions were more neutral, businesslike. As expected, but it was clear that something was already shifting. Just then, the door opened, and in walked Thomas. He greeted everyone with his usual charm, but his gaze immediately landed on me. I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the confusion, the dawning realization that things were not going as he had planned. "Good afternoon, everyone," Thomas said, setting his presentation materials down on the table, trying to maintain his composure. I gave him a polite nod, but the message was clear. Everything had changed. The boardroom fell silent as Thomas took his seat, his eyes still flicking between me and the others around the table. The tension in the air was palpable, but I remained calm. I could feel his unease, the discomfort that radiated from him like an electric current, and it brought me an unexpected sense of satisfaction. He had underestimated me. Now, he would see the consequences of his actions. Sarah Mitchell, the CEO, took charge immediately. Her voice was clear and firm as she addressed the board. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, Peterson Engineering has been undergoing a strategic restructuring, and after extensive evaluation, the executive committee and I have identified critical operational improvements needed across all departments." She paused for a moment, allowing the weight of her words to settle in. The air was heavy with anticipation, but I could sense that the tide had turned. This was no longer a meeting of just department heads and board members. It was a turning point for the company, and for Thomas. Sarah's eyes scanned the room, her gaze finally settling on me. "I'm pleased to announce that Megan Williams has accepted the position of Chief Operations Officer. Effective immediately," she continued, her words carrying a sense of finality that resonated throughout the room. There was a brief pause before a ripple of applause filled the room. I stood as Sarah made the announcement, taking in the moment, but not letting it overtake me. This was just the beginning. And I wasn't going to get lost in the euphoria. The real work was about to begin. Thomas looked as though he had been struck. His face drained of color as he tried to process what had just been said. His mouth opened, but no words came out at first. I watched him carefully, observing the shift in his demeanor from confident department head to a man struggling to come to terms with a decision that was now far beyond his control. "Wait a minute," Thomas finally managed, his voice shaky. "I wasn't aware of this reorganization." His eyes flicked nervously between Sarah and me, his discomfort evident to everyone in the room. Sarah remained calm and composed, her expression unyielding. "The decision was finalized 3 weeks ago," she replied, her tone professional. "It was on a need-to-know basis. And we didn't see a reason to inform you beforehand. But now that everything is in place, I'm proud to announce Megan's appointment as COO." I could feel the shift in the room. The board members, who had once been Thomas's allies, now seemed to regard me with a mixture of approval and curiosity. My name was no longer just an employee number on a spreadsheet. It was a symbol of change, of something bigger than the petty office politics that had long plagued this company. I spoke up, my voice steady and measured. "I'm looking forward to working with all department heads to optimize our operations. We all bring value to this organization, but sometimes it takes the right position to maximize that value." I made sure to meet Thomas's eyes as I spoke. It was a subtle message, but one that he couldn't ignore. His decision to replace me with Olivia would now be subject to my review. I watched as Thomas's face tightened, his lips pressing into a thin line. His body language spoke volumes. He was defeated, but he wasn't ready to admit it. He fumbled with the papers in front of him, his usual air of confidence gone. "Right, of course," he stammered, his voice strained. "We'll just, proceed with the quarterly updates." Then, there was no longer any spark of authority in his words, just a hollow attempt at regaining control. As the meeting progressed, I could feel the tide turning in my favor. The board members, many of whom had always respected me but never truly acknowledged my potential, were now looking to me for guidance. As the meeting moved into discussions of new business, I found myself being asked more questions than anyone else. I wasn't just a participant anymore, I was part of the solution. I was no longer the person in the back of the room. I was the one who was shaping the conversation. Sarah, who had been the driving force behind my promotion, continued to guide the meeting with her usual grace and poise. But I noticed the occasional approving glance she sent my way. We were in sync, our vision for the future of Richardson Engineering aligned. It wasn't long before we arrived at the next agenda item. The conversation shifted to the issue of staffing changes proposed by Thomas, including the decision to replace the senior design engineer position, the one I had held until moments ago, with Olivia, a fresh graduate. The idea had never sat well with me. And now, with my new role firmly in place, I knew it was time to address it head on. I turned to the board, my voice calm but firm. "Thomas has proposed replacing the senior design engineer position with someone who lacks the experience needed for the critical phase of the Westlake project. I believe this decision creates unnecessary risk to both our timeline and budget. I've already spoken with Diana Ford, a highly experienced engineer who's familiar with the Westlake specifications, and I believe she's the logical choice to step into this role." The board members exchanged concerned glances. They were beginning to see through Thomas's attempt at power plays. They were starting to realize that the leadership of this company was shifting in ways they hadn't anticipated. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but his protest was weak. "I just thought fresh perspectives could benefit the team," he said, his voice lacking conviction. I didn't let him off the hook. "I agree that fresh perspectives have value, but we need to ensure that the people we bring in are ready for the challenges ahead. Diana has the experience we need." Sarah nodded approvingly, and soon, the conversation turned to other matters. But the damage had been done. The shift in power had been established. Thomas was no longer in control. and I was now at the helm of a company that had once tried to discard me. As the meeting drew to a close, I could feel the weight of everything that had changed. The company was no longer the place it had been when I first started. It was evolving, and I was at the center of that change. And in that moment, I realized just how much I had learned over the years. Patience, resilience, the quiet power of understanding when to speak and when to remain silent. Those lessons had brought me here. And now, it was my turn to lead. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and change. Richardson Engineering was transforming, and I was right in the thick of it. My new role as Chief Operations Officer felt surreal at times. Yet it also felt like a natural progression. I was no longer the person behind the scenes. I was leading, guiding the company through the challenges that had once seemed so daunting. Thomas had taken the transfer to the Seattle office. His request accepted without hesitation. It wasn't just about the company, it was about a fresh start, for both of us. The look of defeat on his face that day in the boardroom had been enough to remind me that sometimes life has a way of evening things out. What goes around comes around. I spent my first few weeks getting to know each department, breaking down the barriers that had existed between the executive team and the rest of the staff. I wanted everyone to know that, regardless of title or position, we were all part of the same team. I made a point to show my face in every department, talking to engineers, analysts, and support staff alike. It wasn't just about the work, it was about fostering a culture of collaboration and respect. And in that process, I realized something profoundly important. The true strength of an organization lies not in its hierarchy, but in its people. Experience and fresh perspectives, when blended together, created something far more powerful than any single individual. I was ready to help lead Richardson Engineering into a new era, one that valued both the wisdom of experience and the creativity of youth. Thank you for following my story. If you've enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring videos. Stay tuned for more tales of resilience, growth, and transformation.